This is the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
Hi again. It is the Sherman Report for Wednesday, September 11th. Hope you're doing well. I'll have some comments on the debate in a little while. I know you're wondering, but because Andy and I want to kick it around a little bit, I'll just say this. I didn't see anyone as a decisive winner. Most of the time passed watching Kamala adroitly pushing Trump's buttons and watching him take the bait. Neither of those endeavors is very useful in deciding who deserves to be president of the United States for 4 years. So stick around and we'll chat about it. Our Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie here in Canada, has announced sanctions on Israel in terms of denying Canadian and Quebec-made ammunition, which we have been supplying but no longer will. She doesn't like what's going on in Gaza. Maybe she should pay more attention to how that situation developed in the first place and be better informed. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and the Ukrainian community are not happy with the Toronto International Film Festival screening a film called Russians at War. It's a documentary. It was partially financed by Canadian money, and they were outside in full force yesterday. And Andy Stinton, who I mentioned, the small businessman, visits us today, and we'll be talking about several important and a few less important topics while I glower at him for being in a beautiful garden far away in Costa Rica and making me stay in Toronto and freeze here at just 23 scant degrees with nothing but sunny days left until next Tuesday, rising to 26 or 27. It's actually pretty good weather. Andy coming on board right after this.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
And there he is. Hi, Andy.
Oh, my God. I do love you. You're a good friend and you're a good human being. But when you start doing the weather, right? I'm sorry.
Well, no, it's just I'm looking at your weather because, pull the curtain back. You and I were talking for 10 minutes, a few moments before we came on. And you showed me around the garden and I thought, look where he is. And you're there for another month or so. So it's a bit of paradise,
That's right, because I deserve it, because I'm a legend.
I don't know about legend. I think you're coming close, but I definitely know you deserve it. Anyway, you sent me earlier today a very old clipping. It was from 1960, the 1960 United States election. So 64 years ago. And folks out there, if you're playing trivia, that was Kennedy versus Nixon. And Kennedy won, as we know. And if I remember correctly, the reason why Nixon was supposedly the loser was because he looked swarthy and he sweated a lot. But I'm going to read you a bit of the story before we kick it around. In an unprecedented event, it says, the citizen in his living room witnesses a campaign debate staged specifically for him. Vice President Richard M. Nixon, Republican candidate for President of the United States, meets Senator John F. Kennedy, the Democratic candidate, in a face-to-face discussion. So there's a couple of things that pop out at me. The first thing is it's, by today's standards, quite sexist because it's him in his living room. Where's her? There's no evidence of her. And the second thing that comes across is it's a very formal way of writing that newspapers don't use anymore. Do you get that?
I find it interesting. Well, no, I only sent you the picture. You don't think I can read as well, do you? What interested me about that is there were similarities between last night and tonight, or last night and then, in the fact that nobody knew who John F. Kennedy was, and he needed to establish.
They didn't, and he went on to win.
And he went on to establish himself and win, and history repeated itself last night. So
there was we'll get into that in a second, but I've got to say this: the difference between then and now, you might say that that's true, and I can't argue with it. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff thrown up. Oh, he's a Catholic, they'll never vote for a Catholic, that kind of silly stuff. Yeah. But it was also the very first televised debate ever in black and white on grainy 400-line screens that we all had. Yeah. And for me, living in Montreal back then, watching snow as I tried to get the signal in on NBC from Plattsburgh, New York, and for Torontonians at the time, no cable, so they were trying to do the same thing with an antenna pointed at Buffalo. And so it was a kind of a cruddy way to start. And by the tone of this introduction in the newspaper, it doesn't sound like it was anything more than a ha-ha funny experiment. Today, last night's debate, or any debate in the last number of years, tens of years, is glitzy, uses all of the toys that television has, and uses the internet at its fullest to do things like fact check. So it's a real radical departure. And I think in that sense, the debate that we were witness to last night was an interesting exercise, but I don't agree with you in the sense that I don't think there was a winner. I don't think there was a winner. I think probably the United States lost because she's a good prosecutor. She prosecuted him very well, and she used
Yes.
a lot of things to push buttons on Donald. If you say to Donald Trump, 81 million people fired you 4 years ago, he's going to go crazy. And I
Wow.
think she and her strategist knew that. He did.
Well, yeah, but what would happen? We're looking at a man. Number one, let's be honest about the debate in the States. There was 20, I believe 20, or was it 18,000 votes split Pennsylvania last time. So
Something like that, yeah.
We're not looking at the Democrats, or we're not looking at the Republicans or the Trumps or the Harris people. They've already made up their mind.
You're right.
It's that very gray, that independent voter, that nonpartisan person like mine, who may not have all the background. I flip between channels, and CNN had an interesting thing about some people from Erie who hadn't made their minds up, and some of them were for Trump, some of them couldn't make the mind up, some of them needed more opinion, but they were a pretty nonpartisan group. At the end of the day, though, I look at it. I love a debate. I love the game playing.
I know
Forget
you
the
do.
subject.
That's why we do this.
Forget the subject. And I mean, I was almost on the floor. She would dangle this little fishing hook out there with some meat in, and he would grab it every time. His crowd sizes.
It's called the bright, shiny object syndrome. And I'm going to tell you, she did it well. But I still don't know what the answer to the first question was, because it never got answered. And it was the most important question to me of the night. Are you better off now, 4 years after, or than you were 4 years before?
That's subjective.
And she just went on to rattle off what she thought she was going to do. She's been there for 4 years, Andy.
Yeah, okay, but that's the same. When you could say the same that Donald Trump was there for 4 years. I mean, just silly little things that get covered up. Because I'm one of those jerks that goes to look at facts. America, okay, right now is producing more oil than it has in the history of mankind. That's a fact. That's not discussable anymore.
I'm not going to debate it because I'm not going to look it up right now.
And the Democrats can't go out going, oh, look at us, we're doing this, because they've got a lot of Green supporters who don't like to think they're doing this. At the end of the day, I think it's a gigantic game. I think at the end of it, somebody will win.
Yes.
I just don't want to see a man in control of the largest, and you know I'm non-political, the largest armed forces in the world, being so easily sucked in by somebody who, according to him, is stupid and a dumb whatever. I don't want to see he got sucked in by her. What happens with Putin or any other world leader? They're just going to go, okay, thank you, goodbye. And I mean,
I take your argument, and I take your argument, and I don't have a counter argument. But my counter argument is not an argument. It's saying, look, here's a guy who actually spent 4 years in the White House. Times were, if you take a look and review economics, for example, if you take a look at how he started Operation Warp Speed and got the COVID vaccines going, all of those kinds of things count for something. Is he a nut bar? And yeah, he certainly is. But is she an effective president? She says, or had been saying, that she and Joe Biden partnered and made a great partnership for 4 years. And the answer to the question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, is no. So, you know, it's the devil in the deep blue sea. That's the vote that thin edge of the wedge is going to have to make.
Yeah, but we live in this is just the old, I'm surprised you're coming up with this old bone. We live in a global world now. It's not Trudeau or Trump or Macron or Netanyahu that are controlling the world. We live in a global economy. China sneaky, somebody
Are
catches a
you
cold.
talking global or are you talking globalist?
No, I'm talking global influences throughout the world. No economy
Well,
sits on its own anymore.
we're connected to everywhere in the world at the same time. But there's a thing called globalism that you don't want to go anywhere near. And that's the kind of thing that Trudeau foresees. It's the kind of thing that she foresees. I'm a Canadian. I'm happy to be a Canadian. I don't want to be an American. I don't want to be Russian. I don't want to be anything, but I might want to be a Costa Rican. But that's just me with my tongue in my cheek. The point is, I'm happy with what I've got, and I don't need the thinking of the left that is obvious in the way Trudeau presents himself and is obvious as well in the way she presents herself. Or where did you get $1.3 trillion to spend on the Inflation Reduction Act? Those kinds of things. That's what they were doing over the course of the past 4 years.
And of
So
course,
when I say who won the debate, nobody. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm saying you're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. And that's when you say the election is going to be in a couple of weeks and somebody's going to win. That's kind of about it.
I think that if I was going to vote, I couldn't look anybody in the eye and say I'm going to vote for a man who starts when asked a question, and they both missed key opportunities yesterday in answering questions, who when asked a question starts about talking about eating dogs. There was 2 or 3 points, Peter. I truly did not understand what he was talking about. With her, I don't know whether she's right or wrong. I'm not a smart politician like you, but I think she's probably going to be a good babysitter, and that's what we need right now in the world is a babysitter.
Okay, we're going to leave it at that. But I'm looking at my notes here, which I didn't really refer to, but I'm seeing that I bullet pointed eating dogs, arguing
Come
about
on,
estimates
that
of
was
crowd
funny,
size.
Peter.
I know that. I'm trying to be funny too. I'm saying I'm trying. I had noted eating dogs or arguing about estimates of crowd size at rallies, and those were examples of where she pulled it off on him. So, but I still say the question I wanted answered was, "Are people better off now?" And I don't think they are. So I'm worried about that.
There's a
But
lot
we'll
of
leave it
women.
at that.
Okay, let's move
We'll
on to
leave
the
it at
next
that.
subject.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Riddle me this. You're in Costa Rica. You're enjoying the sun. You're probably having a few nice libations to go with it. Am I right in saying that Canadians really stop enjoying summer right at Labor Day? Because, but at the opening of the show, you kidded me. It's 24, 25, 26, 27 degrees, hot and sunny, pool weather right now. But we put on long sleeve shirts. Well, I don't, but people put on long sleeve shirts. Women stop wearing white, men too. And everybody goes to work and school, and summer's over. Summer's not over officially till the 21st of September, and it really doesn't end till about the first week in October. What's wrong with us?
Okay, where do you want me to start this list? No, I've noticed it. I've noticed it since I've been down here, and the reason I love down here is because they have a thing called Por Vida, which is love of life. Except it's not just a tagline. It's not like I love New York or Toronto sucks. No, that's not much of a tagline. So
You can't say that and be true.
No, I think I'm going to market that Toronto sucks t-shirts. It's a way of thinking, and I think. And when you first sent this to me this morning, and you sent this as a subject, I'm going, he's out of his friggin' tree. How can we discuss this? But to thinking about, but look, we could talk about anything. You and I could talk about air for 50 minutes. I think it's a mindset. I think Canadians have forgotten how to have fun. They don't.
That's what I was hoping you'd say, because I agree.
Oh, thank you. Good night.
The reason that
the
reason I put it down as a subject is because I'm among Canadians. You're not right now, and everybody's, and I'm thinking they look like December, but it's still summer. But to them, summer is 8 weeks that start when I send my kids to camp and end when they come back, and it's Labor Day. That's summer. And it's not. Summer is much broader than that. It started in May this year, and we had 3 nice months of it, and we're getting a little bit extra.
I think Canadians need to relax a little. And I think this might be a little bit deeper than I meant it to be. But I think I know my neighbors are, they're so ridden in debt and worried about whether they've got a Porsche Cayenne or a Porsche Macan, and they've got the kids here, and they're struggling upstream, a lot of them. And most people are struggling upstream these days because of themselves. And there's a subject for another day.
Well, and we could say because of economics too. Yourself chooses your job,
Ooh, my
but that's a
parents.
whole other discussion.
Yes, let's
I
have
mean,
that one
it
day.
may be that. It may be that because I go shopping with my wife. She can't drive. And so I take the things off the shelves, put them in the cart, and I see butter. Butter's $8 a pound, $8.50 a pound.
Where
When
do
did
you
that
shop?
happen?
Where do you
But
shop?
Loblaws, Longos, Metro, various. The eggs these days we buy omega-3 eggs. They're six something a dozen. And I can afford it because I've put money away for this time of my life. But a lot of people are going, I'm going to have to pass on that this week. And I think that makes people unhappy too.
Okay, I'm not a good example because I live in Oakville, which is kind of upmarket. But why are you laughing, Sherman?
Because you use that every time as an excuse. Go ahead.
Oh no, where I live is an excuse. I see people affording way too much. I drive down. I drive in Toronto. I don't see people starving. I see people with. Everybody's got an iPhone. Do you know how much a pair of AirPods are, Peter? You know the
No, I
Apple.
don't have them.
Okay, it's because you spent all that money on butter. Cut butter out for. They're
There you go.
They're $200. An iPhone is between $1,400 and $2,000. You drive
Yes.
around, look around. Next time you go out in Toronto, everybody has an iPhone and iPods. Where are they
I'm
getting
going
this
to
two and
ask
a
one
half?
question. I'm going to just ask one question, and I'm not looking for an answer because we're kind of out of time. My question is, if that's what you see, what do you suppose is there that you can't see? And that's what worries me. Andy, I'll talk to you within the next week.
Ciao.
Take care and have fun. It looks like you're doing
Bye.
fine. Bye bye.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
Okay, so there goes Andy, and now I can talk freely about the debate. Now, I don't mean it that way. I really did some thinking about this last night and this morning. And this morning I was leafing through a number of newspapers online, and I talked to a couple of friends. Then I listened to American radio for a while, and I looked at what's called a poll on Facebook. But I say poll in the way I do for only one reason. Polls on social media aren't really polls at all. They're just drop-ins for you to vote whether you liked something or you didn't like it. And this one was totally predictable because it was put out there by a Canadian participant in Facebook. And we already know that 80% of Canadians just plain don't like Trump. Doesn't matter what he's going to say. 80% don't like Trump, and you'll find that in any poll. So there was no surprise when I clicked on who won or who's winning, and the question came up as with an answer. Harris at 78% and Trump at 22%. So that's where Andy sits. It's where most of you sit. I said yesterday that I was pro-Trump, but that I'm not a so-called Trumper. Having seen the debate, I found myself being frustrated. I follow this stuff, as you know, if you follow me at all. So I don't know everything, but I do know a few things. And one of the things I know is called bullshit. It's pretty easy to spot, and I've got a bullshit antenna. There was more than enough of that stuff to go around last night. But if you base your feelings or your comments on factual data, why should you be concerned? It's politics, right? Well, at first blush, if you'd never been exposed to these two candidates, easy to see why many have said that Kamala won the debate. For the most part, she was well rehearsed. Her strategists obviously assisted in finding key points that would get under Trump's skin so she could use them appropriately. And she did. She is schooled at doing that. You can't be the Attorney General of the state of California and a long-term prosecutor and not be. And I'm sure she prepared for it, and a hell of a lot more than he did. For example, he likes to brag about how many people attend his rallies in preparation for the November 5th vote. She denounced his rallies, saying people often got bored and they left on him early, and that his crowds were considerably smaller than he liked to boast. But he grabbed the bait, and that was wrong. And he litigated those kinds of accusations instead of underlining Kamala's lack of credibility as a viable candidate, which is what debates are about. Did it hurt him? We'll have to watch the polls and find out. I suspect very little has changed. But the likely winner of the election remains an issue that is much too close to call. The debate began with Kamala Harris being asked that famous Ronald Reagan question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? We all know the answer. It's actually the same answer here as on the American side of the border. And it's a very loud no. She never answered the question. Instead, she launched into what her campaign was about. And the better than question kind of remained up in the air. And frankly, it still is. And meanwhile, Donald Trump tried to address it by saying what a mess the Biden-Harris team had made of his own prior good works. Frankly, Kamala is a friendly-looking person. She's a well-trained prosecutor, as I mentioned, and she has a quick mind capable of turning words around to elicit the responses she wants. And equally frankly, Donald Trump looked tired and he looked angry. Not a great look. And as I said, he's much too prone to lashing out when his opponent pokes the bear. Here's another example. 81 million Americans fired you in 2020. Saying that to the guy who almost patented or copyrighted the phrase "you're fired" on his television program, made it so popular on TV, it's like tossing a lighted match into a pile of dry timber dust with gasoline. You could say, well, that's great debating, and so she won it. No, I think pushing that kind of button and making him react was a plan to keep a diversion going. And that diversion and deception are two strong concepts in debating. But what we were looking for was answers. Kamala said she's going to invest in your aspirations and dreams. And yet, as sitting vice president, she held the casting vote. That's the deciding vote on bills being passed that fueled rampant inflation, like the Inflation Reduction Act that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago with Andy. What some experts put at well over $1 trillion inflation the printed dollar cost. She also pointed to herself and said, I'm not Biden, which was kind of weird, indicating that she was her own person, I guess. That's fine. But she's also said that she and Biden made such great partners over the last 4 years. And for the most part, Americans, like most Canadians, they've been a rough 4 years. So what is it that's going to change when she becomes president, if indeed she succeeds? It's a bit over the top to support organizations like Black Lives Matter. It's a bit over the top to support race rioters in Minneapolis during the George Floyd business. Just a couple of examples. And then to try to pin defunding the police or eliminating the Constitution on her opponent. Again, push those buttons. That was planned baiting, and it was nonsense. It pains me that Trump honestly came less prepared to present good responses to issues-based questions, and it pains me even more that Harris came ready to debate, well prepared and apparently not tired, but did not defend the Biden administration's inability to move the country forward, and then used a lot of her time to push Trump's buttons. To me, both of those people could have given Americans a better look into the future with them, and I wonder what's in store next time, or even whether there will be a next time. Back in a moment.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
In the debate last night, and I'm not continuing on the debate, I'm going into something else, but I'm using it as a jumping off point. In the debate last night, even Kamala Harris said that Israel has a right to defend itself. I say even Kamala Harris, because I don't get the sense that there's any feeling for Israel there, except the one that she would like to politicize to her advantage. But you don't see her suggesting there would be any sanctions on Israel for what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, anything but. But that's not the case here in Kanakistan, Canada. I hate to call it that, but it some days feels like that. I don't believe our Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie would give the time of day for Israel. I also believe she's pretty pleased with herself for having announced that Canada has suspended 30 permits for arms sales to Israel and is even blocking a contract with the American government to send Quebec-made ammunition via the States to Israel. CIJA, which stands for the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs has taken several steps. They publicly questioned Melanie Joly's motivations and what this means for Israel and for Canada, who have a traditional alliance. They've been working with the Conservatives to push for a hearing on this issue at the Parliamentary Defense Committee, as they should. They've met with the U.S. ambassador to discuss the impact of the embargo on U.S. defense interests and what pressure the Americans can bring to bear on Canada. They've called for the convening of the Canada-Israel Parliamentary Association to increase political pressure on the Trudeau government. CJ also says it'll continue to engage on the issue and bring out more tactics if and when required. I know that Canadian Jews and non-Jews alike are not happy. To me, it's as simple as picking sides, and Joly, Trudeau, and company are simply playing to another voting group now that is enlarged and organized, so it's time to dump the Jews. Sorry, that's just how I see it. This is not a war of Israel's making. It wasn't looking to engage. Israel's economy is in tatters because people have had to move inward from the Lebanese border, give up their homes, at least temporarily. Others have left their jobs because the military called them up for service. The other side used its civilian population to hide rocket launchers, command bunkers, tunnel entrances. They've had a fairly steady stream of ammunition and heavy weapons from Iran, generally coming in through tunnels that allow these supplies to cross the border into Gaza from Egypt. And no one at Joly's level is doing anything constructive about remaining hostages, nor taking into account the cold-blooded execution of 6 young people, hostages also just 10 days ago. I have never liked Melanie Joly. As I've mentioned, I don't care for the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau at all, but you knew that. It's all about them. It's not about us. It's about their best interests electorally versus Israel's best interests, or the issue of who is engaging to support a just cause that would never otherwise have been questioned. Back in one moment.
Now, the Sherman Report continues.
So it's that time of year again. I know not all of you are in Toronto. There are plenty of you listening in Montreal, some in the States, and so forth. I know you know that it's TIFF time, TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and you know it because a lot of it is covered on your TV screens and in reading matter that you peruse. And it's a great time for us here in Toronto because Toronto is now probably second to Cannes. Some people would say the number one film festival in the world. So Toronto hosts it during this part of September every year, and it's very important. It's making some news that would have been nice to avoid, though. The Ukrainian community in Toronto is pretty angry about a particular film presentation, a documentary entitled Russians at War. Obviously about Russians at war inside Ukraine. There have been demonstrations at the film festival, and Ontario's public broadcaster, which is called TVO, has withdrawn support, saying that its board has decided to respect the feedback that it's received and is reviewing the process by which the film was funded, or other films may be funded. The documentary follows Russian soldiers on the front lines of the war in Ukraine, as the title suggests. But it doesn't sound to me like the film is anti-Ukraine. So I'll give you a bit of background. First of all, it's important to know that Canada's Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who has Ukrainian ancestry, has used her public podium to suggest both diplomats and the community have grave concerns about Russians at war. She said this, and I'm quoting, "We as a country have to be very, very clear that there can be no moral equivalency in our understanding of this conflict. It's not right for Canadian public money to be supporting the screening and production of a film like this." So I can take that at face value and just say, okay. But from the description of the film, it appears that maybe it's not so pro-Russia. Russian soldiers are chronicled in the ongoing military engagement and say that the story of the war doesn't match the reality of it in their view. This is Russian soldiers talking, that they doubt their purpose there and fight only to maintain their own personal survival. So in response to the backlash, the film's Russian-Canadian director, Anastasia Trofimova, asserted in a written statement that the film is not propaganda and that it was filmed without the permission of the Russian government. And she said, quoting again, "I want to be clear that this Canada-France co-production is an anti-war film made at great risk to all involved, myself especially." She said that. Look, I have Ukrainian friends, and if they feel this film, or more correctly, its funding, has been hurting them, hurtful to their community, I do understand, and I'm certainly sympathetic to their expressed feelings. But if this were about Freeland bowing in the direction of her family's heritage, then I'm thinking once again about Melanie Joly and her blockage of ammo for Israel. Because if one's connections to cabinet are what count, and our diversity is perhaps not our strength these days, then we can't have an election fast enough for me. Have a great evening. Enjoy this summer weather while it's still summer, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to the Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.